Welcome to Why I Quit, a show that covers real people quitting their 9-to-5 jobs in search of something different. Listen to inspiring conversations where we dive deep into the stories of why people quit their jobs, what were the hardest parts, where are they now, and any advice for people following the same path. We are so excited to introduce Chris Zaccaria as this week's guest on Why I Quit. Listen as Chris discusses his journey of working in 8 different jobs over the course of a decade to figure out his career goals. Learn how being laid off gave him the opportunity to start his own recruiting firm, and get inspired hearing how he's gained control over his schedule and his finances as he has scaled his company, CZ Consulting, over the years. Hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, Dave, I'm good, man. How are you?
Excited to have you on the show and hear about your story. Do you mind starting out telling me a little bit about your education background and how that transitioned into your first job?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for inviting me on. I appreciate it. I studied business intelligence, which I think to this day I kind of still don't know what that really means, but it was really more tech heavy in the business realm, statistics and all that kind of stuff. It was actually a pretty natural segue into like my first internship, which turned into a full-time job in New York, working for a company called Protiviti. They are a pretty large consulting firm. And I was specifically working on the ERP implementation group, doing like audits and consulting services for clients. So, you know, definitely kind of a natural segue there. So
that first job that you had, did you see that as, a long career that you thought you were going to be there for a long time? Did you see that as kind of like a stepping stone to other things? Or where was your mindset at when you started that first job after school?
I think in the beginning, I definitely thought it was. I loved the internship, and I took, I took that full-time job, like going into it super excited, probably like some rose-colored glasses, coming right out of school. You don't know what to expect, and just all around good people. So I will say, like, I know Protiviti was like highly rated for their internship and like their work experience, and I had nothing but good experiences there. So I was relatively happy, and I met very good people. But I don't know. I think like things just started to change a little bit. I was there for, I think, over 2 years, and you just sort of like feel that. I think you feel like that corporate hierarchy and that kind of like office politics, and it's just anywhere you go. I think you're going to experience some of that. And I think, to be honest, there are people who are meant to do that and fit well in that hustle. I think from a very early age, I always knew that I wanted to go out and like make something on my own. And it started with me wanting to like follow in my father's footsteps as a surgeon. And, healthcare has gone in a completely different direction since he started. And so he helped discourage me a little bit, like not in a bad way, but just like encourage me to explore other avenues. I think that same thing goes with like the corporate ladder. Is like sometimes there's that encouragement and that push to like climb the ladder and like fit in. And it was like, I think I always felt kind of that entrepreneurial spirit. Like for a while I said I wanted to own like a guitar store, and like be like a guitar technician and like and kind of sell musical instruments and that kind of thing. And so like even from early on that itch was there. And I think that started to become more and more prevalent as I got involved in that corporate experience.
On the entrepreneur side, were you constantly thinking of ideas or ways that you could start your own thing? Were you dabbling with side hustles, or, what was your kind of, thought process in terms of like how to make that happen?
Yeah, good question. No, I was not dabbling in side hustles or anything like that. Not at least for a while. I think my version of dabbling in like different things was just quitting and taking new jobs, So I kind of became like the stereotypical job hopper millennial. Like I think I've had in a decade probably 7 or 8 different jobs, and it doesn't look great on a resume. So it's a little scary, but I'm glad I did it because it led me to where I am today. And I think like, I wound up like thinking more and more about what my skill set was that I like could help me find a business or like create a business, right? And like find something to build. But I wasn't particularly specialized in anything because I went from like, a technology consulting company to like a food service sales to like a mortgage servicing company to financial. It was like really like people look at your resume and they're like, what do you want to do? That was like the first question I would get from HR interviews. I did start a side hustle I want to say it was like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's probably somewhere around like 2018, 2019, called Big Zac Microgreens. And that was like, I was listening to another podcast about like how you could make some side money. I was Ubering for a while. Like I wanted to like just pull in more cash just to help make life easier. So I started that side gig in kind of honor, whole other side story, but in honor of my grandma who is sort of like the self-proclaimed New Jersey tomato queen. She grew some of the biggest tomatoes in Jersey. And I wanted to like take my inspiration because I love gardening. So I wanted to take my inspiration and grow microgreens and sell them to local restaurants. And I did. And then right at 2020, like the pandemic hit and it was like, there's no chance this is sustainable. Like everybody's shut down. Like I couldn't sell anything. So I kind of moved on from that and just sort of put my head down and was like, all right, I guess I just am going to go be like a financial specialist for this other firm and put my head down and kind of just grind away like everybody else.
I'd love to know if you thought, like pre-COVID, if that could be a full-time thing, or if you always thought that was going to be a smaller side hustle. And then also kind of like, what were some of your biggest like takeaways and learning lessons of like your first like, side business that you started up as well?
So I definitely thought it could be a sustainable full-time thing. There are people out there, like I followed a guy named Curtis Stone. If anybody looks him up on YouTube, like he was one of the biggest influencers in that space and showed that it's not hard or it's not easy, but it's not also like tremendously difficult. So I figured I could scale it to the point where I could make that happen. And obviously with the pandemic, it didn't, but I had dreams of like internal hydroponic, like vertical farms, and like, I was like, this could be really cool. There's people who make good money doing this. It was tough because it was like taking up nights and weekends because you're still trying to work a full-time job. So I was hoping to get to that break-even point where I could quit my full-time. And then I guess your second question around like lessons learned, I needed to be willing to like throw everything into something, and I wasn't going to be able to just do it halfway. Like I think in addition to the pandemic also caused me to pull away from microgreens because I was like, it was not sustainable enough from like an income standpoint without like a very large client base to be able to throw everything into it. At that time, it was probably just too much of a risk for me. I don't know. It's hard. Like lessons learned were tough because it's like I didn't have a whole lot of time in it before the pandemic, but I think like just knowing I needed to find something I could throw my all into and be a real expert at the craft. And I think there were just too many barriers from a physical standpoint. Like I didn't have enough space in my house. I didn't have, enough equipment. It was just like a lot of startup costs. And that was probably the biggest thing is like, I might've started to bite off a little bit more than I could chew at that exact moment.
And would you say there's anything in terms of, I know when people are starting a business, like a lot of times there's like a learning curve, even with, things such as like setting up an LLC or setting up a business bank account, just like even accepting money or, like
Oh yeah.
understanding, the reporting aspect of it, like all of these different things, filing taxes, were you able to take away some like setting up some like baseline understandings of running a business that you were able to like that helped in terms of like starting your new venture?
Yeah, absolutely. That I think running that little microgreens business helped me a lot with research and knowing how to like self-educate about those things. Cause you really don't like know until you're in it about like what all your responsibilities outside of just running the business are. So yeah, I had to sit there and like watch YouTube tutorials and train myself not only on how to grow really great plants, but like also how to like run QuickBooks and send invoices to customers and like things you don't think about on the back end of business. Once that kind of closed up shop and things changed with the pandemic, I was approached by Robert Half to come and join, which, if you're not familiar with, is one of the largest recruiting and staffing firms in the world. And it's funny because like my why never really changed. Like my why was always about other people. So like I loved working in restaurants as a teenager and in high school, and like I loved serving people, and I loved like being interactive and making friends, and like microgreens. I loved sharing the food that I made. You know, that's like a very big part of who I am. Like I love cooking and providing and giving to friends. So recruiting and staffing, funny enough, had always been in my mind, and I'd never like approached it. And I realized you didn't ask me about this, but the training segue kind of like made a natural sense for me to talk about, because I thought about like many times getting into recruiting and staffing. I'd have friends reach out to me, and I always was like, nah, like just keep pushing it off. And it was like that thing that just wouldn't go away. Like it kept rearing its head. And I was like, all right, maybe I should consider this. So when Robert Half came along, I was like, hang on a minute. Like I was 2.5 years into like a financial sales specialist role. And the CEO of that company, of Philips Medical I worked for, he said some really inspirational things to me at the end of my tenure there, and said like he encouraged me and said like, you are a really good guy and you're very smart, but you need to become specialized in something or you're not going to be valuable to anybody. And at first I was like, that's a very like upfront thing to say, you know. Full transparency, he is a Dutch gentleman. So if you know much about their culture, they are very direct. And I really appreciated what he said after I had some time to process it. And I was like, you are completely right. Like he just meant it like you need to train yourself. You need to become specialized. You need to be an asset to people, or else you're just going to kind of be coasting along. And I think he saw that entrepreneurial spirit in me, and he knew like, go train, go find something you're passionate about. And at that moment I was like, well crap, I don't know what that is. Like, and when Robert Half approached me, I kind of dived head first and was like, this might be it. Like it keeps coming back. Maybe I'll just get in with a really solid organization who I know can train me in the right way and take it from there.
I'd love to talk about kind of the amount of positions you had over that time, kind of like getting to that point. You know, I think a lot of people, quit or, hop jobs in terms of like, sometimes it's, purely financial. Other times it's better flexibility, better work life balance, or, changing careers and wanting to find something. It sounded like you were going into like different types of roles. Do you think you were trying to figure out like what that role you wanted long term to be was? Was it also financial? Like, what was kind of your thought process as you were going, to these different positions?
Money. Just how much money can I make? I didn't care what I was doing. Like, not at all how I feel now, but I was chasing the dollar. And that's why I always pursued sales jobs, because you always think sales folks make the most money because they're making commission. But foolishly not realizing like the amount of work that it takes to build business is a lot. And I've always felt naturally good at sales, but it's hard to keep resetting. Like just every time you change industry, change jobs, change companies, like you're hitting the reset button. And that can sometimes be more of a detriment than sticking around.
As you went into Robert Half, kind of talk to me about your experience with it. Sounds like, that was like a role or an industry that kind of more fit what you were like looking for like long term. So talk to me a little bit about, that experience when you first started and what you liked so much about it.
As soon as I started, I knew it was an aggressive industry, staffing. Like it's fast paced. You got to be on your toes. And I kind of got thrown into the fire there, like from a learning perspective. And it was everything I absolutely needed. And it's just sort of like, I was lucky. Everything lined up, like the right company, the right time and place, and the right industry for me. There's a couple schools of thoughts on this job hopping and like finding your passion, right? Because millennials are always about like, it seems the theme is like, I got to be passionate about my job. And I've read quotes where it's like, don't try to find a job that you're passionate about. Find a good job and become passionate about it. But I completely disagree with that, because I think like trying to force yourself to be passionate about something is not going to work. So at least it didn't work for me. So I like when I joined Robert Half, I immediately knew absolutely I want to be in staffing. I loved it. I love talking to different people, the good and the bad. Like you'll hear some crazy stories from staffing firms, like just the characters that you run into, interviewing people out there hunting for business, and it can be cutthroat, man. Like it's tough. The industry was incredible for me. So I love the highs and the lows. That's how sales are, right? Always highs and lows. I love the wins. I love celebrating with your team.
For this, you're in this full time role. You've always had kind of the entrepreneurial spirit of like potentially starting your own thing. Talk to me a little bit about how you thought about your priorities. Like, obviously, before like money was like a big focus in terms of like, kind of building your career. As kind of transitioned into starting your own thing, did your priorities change at all between like work life balance, the type of projects you want to work on, money? Like, how did you think about like prioritizing all those things?
I think I was all over the place. Like I think in the beginning of my career, unmarried, no kids, like no mortgage, I was very focused on just like building a name for myself in the career corporate, like in the ladder, like climbing the ladder, getting a name for myself, having that sense of prestige, and also making money, right? As I went through a lot of these jobs, the biggest source of frustration for me in a lot of corporate salaried jobs were like very much the office space dilemma. Peter Gibbons, right? I could work for 4 more hours this week and, help Initech stock go up 10 cents and I don't see another dime, like and that's so true. It's like, I think I started to realize that like my values were very much focused on the direct correlation of my effort to the amount of money that I was being paid. And like I accused myself of being lazy for a long time because I'm like I would show up late to meetings, I'd like dress sloppily. Side note, I love owning my own business cuz now I can wear a hat and t-shirt and nobody can yell at me for it. So, you know what I mean? Like I was getting lazy and I was like, "What's wrong with you? Like you got to step it up here if you want to have any kind of like self-respect, But I realized like I was not aligned with my values. Like my values were very much like I want to directly be compensated for how much effort I put in. And I think that's why I was pursuing like all these sales jobs because that tends to have a much better correlation with the effort you put in and what you get out of it. But I realized I was really good at the relationship management part of it. So that was when the gears started really turning. Like I I think there's something different or better out there that I could do just, you know, that I could really play to that desire for me to like build something but also be compensated directly for my effort.
And talk to me about the transition into starting your own business in terms of, what was your confidence level at? Were you at a level where you were, feeling super confident that, I can figure it out no matter what. And, I know what I'm doing to like, what the hell am I doing? Like, talk to me about where your mind was at.
Dude, I was so scared. I had incredible training at Robert Half. I left Robert Half to take a VP, not a VP, like a director of sales position for another smaller staffing firm in New Jersey that was kind of more of a startup feel. And I was definitely frustrated with some of like the processes there that I felt like could be improved. Eventually I was laid off, and as I was looking for other jobs, I was thinking to myself like I wonder if I could just actually do this on my own because I think I doubted myself a lot, to be honest, in the beginning. Like I was scared. We were in a lot of debt. Like I wasn't making the money I wanted to make. And the debt only got worse because we were starting a business eventually. I know I'm fast forwarding a bit in the conversation, but like it was scary. I think my wife was like, wait, what? You're gonna start a business? We like just had a kid. Like he's 2 now, but it was very risky. So I think like when you're facing that level of challenge, like you kind of doubt yourself because it's just a scary circumstance. But I think I had to reassure myself, like looking back at the experience I had, saying like, you got this, you know what to do. And I think like you are finally specialized in something enough that you can do it well. And I always like to think like learning or seeing the things that you don't want to do or don't want to be shape you and give you better motivation than the things that you would want to be, if that makes sense. Like, so seeing how things are done improperly helped me do them the way that I know they should be, and have, I think, led to some semblance of success.
Something we talk about with every guest on this show is really the expectation versus reality of the first year. I think, like, especially when you're going out and starting your own business,
Yeah.
I think some people have like super high expectations and super high goals. Other people are maybe are super scared and don't know, like, can they support themselves? So, kind of what were your expectations kind of heading into the first year, and what was the reality of that?
My expectations were actually kind of aggressive, like for a first year. I knew, so I started in September of 2022, and I knew up until probably December, maybe I like January, I wasn't really going to see any income at all, because at least from the staffing industry, that's usually about how long it takes to get your book going. And I was spot on with that estimate. Like, I saw my first paycheck in December and then another in January. And after those two paychecks and after that expectation kind of was met, I really didn't set any expectations for myself. I knew where I wanted to be, but I was like, we have to control this, because if you start getting too excited or thinking things are going to be too good, like, you could set yourself up for failure. You could set yourself up for complacency. So I don't want to say I didn't have expectations, but I kept them fairly conservative. I was trying to just keep my head down and focus on the business and not think or plan too much.
And talk to me a little bit about kind of the transition from like the corporate world where typically you're working with a team. I'm guessing you went into the office a lot, now to, being solo and being completely relying on yourself, being a little bit more isolated. What's that experience been like for you?
Absolutely life changing. I'm so happy with running my own schedule, and I don't have to go to the office for the sake of being a butt in a seat. And I think we've all realized that, whether we're corporate or not, in the pandemic, like, people are just as efficient outside the office as they are in. Now, I do rent an office space to go into every once in a while, because I have a 2-year-old and a small house, and you got to get the heck out of here sometimes. But it is so different, man. And it was so reassuring to me. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but like, I knew that there were certain things that, like, certain meetings that didn't need to be had, or times of day when you didn't need to be grinding away. Like, I'll be honest, I don't really work most Fridays. And in a sales environment and a recruiting environment, Fridays are kind of like a moot point. Like, people don't want to be sold to, people don't want to be recruited. I'll do what I call responsive Fridays. Like, if you email me or text me, like, I will get back to you. But I'm not actively sitting at my desk like slinging phones and emails, right? Like, and that has been so life-changing, because like, I could pick up my stuff on a Wednesday afternoon and go see my son's soccer practice when I would have had to be in work, and I could travel back and forth to New Jersey. I live in Pennsylvania now, and see my family on any given weekend and not have to worry about getting to the office first thing on Monday morning. So, in short, life changing.
And talk to me about, the balance with, having a family now and running your own business. Do you find it difficult to balance the time, or do you focus more on like prioritizing your time, or how do you think about schedule as you're like mapping out your weeks?
I'd be dead without my calendar. I have to, like, between our personal calendar and my regular calendar, I have to schedule everything out. I do have to now, at this point in my business, schedule time to be away. Like, I have to block out Fridays to make sure I have personal time and time with my son and everything. As the business gets busier, it can be difficult. It's a balance. You have to decide, literally, like, is this email or is this phone call a revenue generating activity? Is it worth it? And if it is, what am I sacrificing on the other end of, like, time with my son or my wife or my animals? That's been the hardest part of it, to be honest. Cause like, I want the money. I want my family to be well and successful. I want to pay off all my debt, like, and I'm motivated, but it's tough, because it's like, what do they say? Like, it makes sure you sit back and enjoy the journey, right? Like, you really do, even when things aren't all peaches and cream. Like, you still have to enjoy every minute of it. So I try to remind myself, like, enjoy the process, but priorities can get tricky.
Looking back when you first made the leap, what's the best piece of advice you were given, or like what's a piece of advice you wish you knew for, other people that are thinking about following a similar path?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. You probably have a bigger network of people who would be willing to help you than you actually realize. What did Mr. Rogers say? Always look for the helpers. There will always be people wanting to help. And look, I've become a fairly cynical guy in my mid 30s, like substantially different than what I used to be in my 20s, right? And even with that, look for the helpers. Seriously, they are out there. There will always be people who want to come to your cause. And if you don't have anybody, call me, man, because I'll help you out. It's I think that's the biggest thing. And then the second part is trust in yourself. You got this. Like, you really do. Businesses fail all the time, but you will never know until you do it. My case was like probably the worst. Like, we were in a ton of debt. My wife just had 2 miscarriages. We have a 2.5-year-old. Like, we have mortgage on a house. Like, she was like, you're not starting a business. Like, this is crazy. But I was like, I just got let go from my job. If not now, then when am I going to do it? It is so easy to like put things off, and now is as good a time as any to start stuff, right? Go easy on yourself. Like, it's a hard start, and there's a lot of learning to be had, but you can lean on other people.
Something that we always ask every guest too is, over the next like 3 to 5 years, what are you most excited about? And it could be personal, business, both, like what gets you most excited?
So I think being debt free gets me really excited. Nobody likes to live under the burden of owing somebody else money. So I think having a capacity to get there via my own company is big. I think I'm excited to see where it goes, because I try to take a moment every week or so and look back and remind myself like where I started with all this and look at where it's come. It might not, to me, feel like tremendous growth, but I am reminded constantly by my family and friends, like, look at how far you've come, and that's always encouraging. So I think I look forward to just seeing it grow more and more, and hopefully building it to a point where it just is very well established and it can be a long-term legacy. My long-term dreams are, this is a legacy for my children if they want to continue it. It's an avenue to financial freedom. It's a capability to help other people. Like, I'm helping find people their dream careers, and I'm helping companies find awesome talent. And eventually I'd like to build a team and hire people. That's exciting to me.
No, that's great. Well, excited to follow along with the journey. And if you don't mind, can you just give everyone a quick elevator pitch about, your company, your services, and where to find you?
Yeah. So CZ Consulting is a full service staffing and recruiting firm. We specifically focus on direct hire and permanent placement within accounting, finance, IT. We dabble in healthcare as well, but really focused on our values, which is the distinguishing point for us. So honesty, service, integrity, and trust. We are fiercely dedicated to being honest in this environment where the staffing industry is sorely needing some of that. My website is czrecruit.com. And I think my email is on there. If it's not, it should be, but it's chris@czrecruit.com. So I'm always happy to help anybody find a job, or hiring managers. If you're looking for talent, I'm your guy. We're your team. So
love it. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. Super inspirational. And I'm excited to track and watch what you do next.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show, and looking forward to seeing your show grow too, man.
Thank you for listening. It really means a lot to us. We want to hear from you as we keep growing. Please reach out on whyquit.co if you have any feedback or potential guests. A special thanks to Chris Dole for the music. Please check out his newest album, Here's to You, on Spotify. Thank you, and we will be back next week with another episode.